Dan, why am I blindfolded? Last time you blindfolded somebody, they never found the body.
It's because we've got a really unusual car today, Alex. I want you to try and guess what it is.
Okay, it's big, it's a high roof, it's an SUV. The roof is tapering. It's an SUV with a tapered roof.
There's more.
Oh, it's silent. It's an EV.
What about now?
Oh, that's a performance car engine. Okay, so it's a big SUV, it's a coupe, an EV, and a performance car?
Yes, it's all of these things. It is, of course, the Porsche Cayenne E-Hybrid Coupe.
Dan, this is a really interesting car, primarily because it is trying to do so many different things. But what I want to answer in this video is, in doing so many things, is it not doing any of them as good as it could? And also, why aren't we in the Turbo SE Hybrid, the flagship performance model?
I can give you 144,000 good reasons why we're not in that car, because that's exactly how many extra dollars you have to pay for it over this. It's phenomenally expensive.
But then again, this car here, the entry-level hybrid Cayenne, isn't exactly cheap either. About 155 grand for this coupe model before on roads.
But you do get a lot for your cash. For a start, underneath that bonnet, there is a 3-litre turbocharged V6 petrol, and in between its 8-speed automatic gearbox and the engine, there is a 100 kilowatt electric motor as well, which of course makes this the hybrid.
Yeah, and total outputs are pretty decent. 340 kilowatts.
And 700 newton meters of torque, so it's got some muscle.
It does have some muscle. It also has been upgraded recently, so Porsche improved the hybrid system and on its Cayenne range about 6 months ago, gave it a bigger battery, 17.9 kilowatt hours now, and what that means is it has increased your EV only range by about 30%.
Yes, this car can go about 50 kilometers without burning a single drop of petrol.
And that's kind of smug driving a big SUV like this around just on electric juice only. I have been driving this car for the last couple of days, but I do have to say that I haven't been able to get close to the 50k claimed range yet.
That's probably a lot to do with the wheels on this car. As soon as you put on optional, bigger, wider rubber, then that does impact the range of electric only.
But the way that the hybrid system is integrated with the internal combustion engine is very nicely done. We'll get to that a bit later. Inside, we're getting lots of gear as well, which I like. Build quality is typically Porsche, excellent. Although there are a few things that we're missing out on, like heated seats.
Yeah, I'm sorry, if you're paying 155 grand for a car, I kind of expect that stuff chucked in.
Yeah, that feels a little bit mean. There's another active safety system that this car doesn't have, which I was expecting, which is adaptive cruise control.
And it doesn't get that either.
No, it doesn't.
That's weird. It has got a few options, but some of the standard inclusions that I particularly like are things like pre-climatization, which is where you can set a time for its hybrid system to bring up the air conditioning or the heaters and make sure your car is all cozy and ready for you to get in before you even alight. Other things I love are that huge digital touch screen, this fantastic digital driver's instrument display, but in Porsche tradition, the central tachometer is still mechanical.
I love those. I also love that this car still continues with Porsche's traditional 5-dial layout. I also do like the big screen, as you mentioned, although one annoying feature is that when you have Apple CarPlay or Android Auto connected, it doesn't go full width. It's kind of narrow right in the center, which is annoying.
Weird. This one I noticed has got the Sport Chrono package, which brings that lovely dial up there, which I gladly wear on my wrist, and the Sports Response button down here.
We'll get to all of the drive modes a bit later because there are many of them. So lots of equipment, lots of perceived quality. It's really nicely built, isn't it? It's very solid, no squeaks and rattles just yet. But one of the most contentious things with coupe SUVs is the design. So let's pull over for a closer look. Okay, Dan, people either love or hate coupe SUVs. Are you a lover or a hater?
In general, I hate them. The principle is flawed and compromised.
Yes.
This one in particular, I rather like it.
Oh my God, for once you and I totally agree on something. Somewhere in the universe, a black hole has just opened. But I agree. I think this one looks actually quite cool.
What do we think of the color?
I think that's part of the reason why I like it. Quartzite gray metallic, not a color I'd normally like, but in this spec, I do like it.
Would you still like it if I told you it was an option? Because it is. You have to pay more for that rather standard looking color.
Of course you do. That doesn't surprise me because these 21-inch wheels, which do look really cool, are also an option. Guess how much?
Surprise me.
$8,300 for 21-inch wheels.
That is ridiculous.
But it's not the craziest option you can have with this car. If you're feeling completely cray-cray, you can tick the lightweight sport pack carbon, which gets you a sculpted carbon roof and some other bits and bobs for $33,000.
That is ridiculous.
That is insane.
Something you don't have to pay for are these lovely acid green highlights. Very important for Porsche because that means it's either electric or hybridized.
That's
somehow.
the Colin card, isn't it?
Yes, it is. If you're stupid though, you can delete that as a no-cost option. But why would you do that?
I love the acid green.
This bit though, this is the most important part, the coupe elegant roofline. I think it works beautifully, a little bit like Panamera. I think it's elegant and lovely. It's not compromised,
gosh.
works with the proportions. I like it.
I agree with you again. They've neatly sidestepped the huge mistake BMW made with the X6. This one actually looks really nice. It's seamlessly integrated. I like it. But my favorite view of the whole car is the back end, particularly because you get this full width light bar, which I really like. Also these quad sports exhausts.
Also optional.
Of course. But you also get an active rear spoiler, which is quite cool. It extends out by 135 millimeters, but when it is extended, it looks a bit dreadful to my eye, I think. It looks like the car's broken somehow.
Yeah, it looks like, as you said before, the boot's closed and something hasn't closed with it properly.
Yeah. Speaking of the boot, what have we got in here?
Well, obviously, because of the elegant roofline, space is a little compromised. It's about 180 litres smaller than the SUV. This one, though, is a little bit smaller still because there's a hybrid battery underneath the boot that you need to accommodate.
Okay, so decent boot, but compromised compared to the wagon.
Yes.
Speaking of compromises, let's look at the back seat, see if that roofline has ruined headroom.
Well, actually, it's not too bad back here.
Again, pleasantly surprised because I've actually got a decent amount of headroom.
And I've got this little sort of power dome above me to make room for my head.
Power dome, I love it.
But how did they do it? They did it by lowering the rear seat.
Yeah, so the roof line is 20 millimeters lower than the wagon version, but the rear seat is lower by 30 millimeters, so boom.
That's genius.
Why we've got headroom.
But it hasn't compromised comfort too much. I do feel like my underthigh support isn't so good, but loads of legroom and loads of toe room as well.
Yeah, the cushion itself is very nice and comfortable, as you'd expect in a car worth 170 grand.
Yes, please.
But big center armrest, 2 cup holders. You can still use them while you've got your arm on here. That's handy.
And adjustable recline as well. And cleverly ergonomic as well with that little lever down there. It's really convenient.
I really like these grab handles too, which are, you know, mirrored in the front. And you get 2 rear air vents, 2 USB-C ports, and a 12-volt socket.
And I'm particularly enjoying that huge panoramic sunroof from back here as well.
Me too. It's such an airy cabin. It's a really nice place to be in the second row.
Surprisingly so. But what this car has to do really well is the way it drives.
Before we get going, Dan, let's try a launch control because in E mode it gives you an extra bit of electric assistance. Ooh. Launch control, and away we go. Oh, that's a launch. Oh,
interesting.
Okay, so that's 100 k's an hour. The initial launch is really ferocious, but then it kind of tapers off.
Yeah, real good dollop of electric torque combined with the petrol engine, and then I think you would run out of the electric influence and it kind of flattens. So, oh well, good for about 0 to 8, I think.
That's all you need getting away from the lights, really. First impressions, Dan, are this is an extremely refined and luxurious SUV to cruise around in.
Absolutely, out on country roads like this, it's incredibly relaxing, really quiet in here, and even though it's a more sporty chassis, it also manages to be really comfortable and a cruiser as well.
And where that hybrid powertrain really comes into its own is when you're cruising around town, dropping the kids off at school, heading into the office, you can just waft along on battery power alone. You feel really smug. And also, it's a better experience because you have instant response from the battery when you're pulling out of intersections.
It just goes to show how even a car of this size can make sense in a more suburban environment.
Yeah.
I love driving around on just EV because it's like a game. It's like, how far can I get it? And you become a bit of an efficiency hero, far more than I feel you do when you're driving a petrol car.
And it is so quiet. And the thing that has really struck me is how beautifully integrated it is with that V6 petrol.
That's the genius of this system for me. Rather than add on extra motors in other places you wouldn't normally get them, that 100 kilowatt motor is in between the gearbox and the engine. So you wouldn't even know it's there, and it doesn't interrupt normal operation of an internal combustion powertrain that we're used to.
Absolutely, and that V6 itself is so nicely isolated and the engine is so smooth that it really suits the character of the car. It's nice and refined. Speaking of gearboxes, we have a conventional 8-speed automatic in this car, unlike the hybrid version you get in the Porsche Panamera, which uses a dual clutch.
And that's because towing is, of course, a lot better with a conventional automatic, if you intend to do that. Also, we've got the standard steel spring suspension.
Which I'm pretty impressed by, actually.
Same.
We're on some really rough course roads now, typical Aussie B-road stuff. The ride quality is great. I'm not getting too much head toss. There's no big bangs and thuds. So I would give that one a thumbs up. But if you want to, you can also option air springs for this car.
And that's the option to go for if you're going to do any serious off-roading, because of course you can raise the body up to about 150 millimeters for maximum ground clearance. And in the SUV version of the Cayenne E-Hybrid, I did some off-roading and it was actually incredibly surprising how far I got.
Okay, interesting. In typical Porsche fashion, the steering is it's almost perfect, I would say, in terms of the smoothness, the rate of response. I'm getting a decent amount of feedback through the steering wheel, which you don't really expect in a big SUV like this, but top marks for the steering.
There's quite a lot of resistance to roll going through some of these corners as well. And again, maybe it's just a traditional straight up and down steel sprung suspension system that we're thanking for that. But yeah, it's actually really surprising how it's resisting that body roll.
Porsche just gets the fundamentals right, doesn't it?
Yeah, 100%.
Seating position of the steering wheel, the weight and feel of the steering itself. One thing that I'm not entirely convinced by, though, is the brake pedal feel in this car, because it's used to, recapture some energy under braking, and the feel itself isn't fantastic. And I also find the low speed modulation around town can be a little bit tricky. That last little bit when you need a lot of brake pressure to come to a complete stop, it's a little bit tricky to judge.
Disappointing that the masters of the brake pedal Porsche couldn't even master that weird hybrid feeling.
It's a small thing, but a noticeable thing.
But we've got a few driving modes to play around with in here. Yeah, all right.
A gazillion.
Okay. Let's play with some of them.
All right, so you got pure EV mode, which is just E. I've got a little Manatino here to play with them, or you can adjust them on the central screen as well. We've got hybrid, which uses both the battery and the internal combustion engine. But one thing we need to do is chuck it around into sport. See what that does.
That's strong. I mean, I know we're not in the flagship Turbo SE Hybrid, but that's enough performance for me for now.
You do cop a weight penalty in this car for going for the hybrid version, about 180 extra kilos over the V6 only one. But, I think the response and the performance is still very strong.
Yeah, absolutely. Even though there's virtually no turbo lag in that engine, it's hard to tell what's going on because the electric fills in any gaps in torque, and that really is where the advantage is. It's not just about going around town and not making any emissions, it is a genuine performance improvement as well.
Question for you though, it's going to go down to second gear now. Does it sound as good and as loud as you expect it to? No, me either. It's refined, it's cultured, it's not what I would call an engaging exhaust noise.
No, the sound that is there is really good. It sounds lovely. It sounds like a proper muscular and sort of nicely tuned V6 engine. I just want more of it.
Yeah, me too. It's just a bit muted.
Yeah.
So that's a bit of a bummer. And this is a Porsche, Dan, so it needs to go around corners in typical Porsche fashion. So we've got a few coming up now. Let's put it into Sport Plus mode, which puts the suspension into its firmest settings.
Tons of grip, loads of grip.
It is pretty incredible what big SUVs can do these days, isn't it?
Like my eyes are telling me I'm in a big SUV sitting high off the road, but the physics is just not aligning with it. It doesn't seem to make sense.
I'm smiling more than I was expecting I would.
Wow, it's got some attitude as well. I love it on the limit.
I don't know if I'm smiling and having fun because it's genuinely enjoyable, or if I'm just amazed at what such a big bus can do.
It is pretty physics defying.
It is, absolutely.
I think I'm enjoying this for both of those reasons. It's like it shouldn't be able to do this, but it also seems to be doing it with a degree of athleticism I wasn't expecting.
That was more fun than I was expecting. I've driven this car up to sort of 8 or 9/10 before, but I haven't really grabbed it by the scruff. And when you do, there is some chassis talent there for sure.
Tons of grip. That's the most surprising thing for me. But even when you start to exceed those limits, it's playful as well.
There is loads of grip, as you'd expect, because we've got loads of rubber, don't we? A 305 or 315 section rear tyre.
Yeah, huge Pirelli P0s. Yeah. And it's all-wheel drive as well, so we're getting more grip from that too.
Yeah, absolutely. So the grip threshold is very high, but you can exceed that if you start to push on, and it will push into sort of a benign understeer moment, and it's kind of at that point where you start to realise there's a lot of weight, a lot of physics happening here, isn't there?
Do you feel like you're kind of asking it to do something it's not entirely happy doing?
Yeah, a little bit. If we were in the GTS variant of the Cayenne, I think, the chassis would be egging me on a bit more to push a bit harder. But right now, I think the hybrid is tolerating what I'm asking it to do rather than enjoying it.
Well, I'm enjoying what you're asking it to do. I think it's fantastic. I've got one more question for you to consider as well.
Please do.
This hybrid system is kind of to replace the diesel.
Yeah.
Is it better than a diesel? Because you get that extra added torque, it's more efficient than a diesel, so it's kind of actually doing all the jobs you might be missing by not being able to buy a diesel, but is it preferred? Is it the way to go?
Yes, for two reasons. One, you don't have to get smelly, oily hands at the Bowser, which I hate with diesels.
Yeah.
And two, because, well, I think it shifts the focus of the car, because a diesel is it's a beautiful engine. Like a 6-cylinder diesel is great. And it's more of a long distance missile, isn't it? Because a diesel, you're going to get huge range. But with this, I think you're leaning into the fact you're going to use this car for small trips. You need that EV juice to do your commute, drop the kids at school, really use it around town, whereas a diesel, it's more of a long distance cruiser. So yes and no.
I think for off-road use, this probably makes more sense than the diesel. Of course, the electronics have been geared in this particular model to make better use of the electric when you're in off-road situations, as long as you switch it around to all the right modes. But you're dead right. As a long-distance cruiser, this can never really equal the advantages of a diesel.
So what we're saying is that this car is ideal for the person looking for a big SUV with a coupe roof line, has a short commute to maximise the electric gubbins.
Yes.
Also does some hardcore off-roading on the weekends, and has 170 grand of disposable income to drop on one of these.
So you've highlighted a group of about 9 people in Australia.
If you can find me 9, I would be impressed. If you're still here, thank you for hanging around to the end of the video. We're going to treat you with a launch control start.
Ah, that's your reward.
And while this happens, click the videos that are popping up now! Ooh, and give us a like and hit subscribe. We're going to have more of these videos every single week.